One moment the room was full of laughter, silverware clinking against china, the warm hum of my family gathered for Sunday dinner. The next moment, silence fell like a thunderclap, broken only by the trembling voice of my wife's cousin Melissa. "Tell them the truth," she said, her eyes locked on me, her face flushed red. Her wine glass slipped from her hand, spilling dark liquid across the tablecloth like a spreading stain of blood. Confounded, I blinked. What are you discussing?" Melissa smiled bitterly as her lips curled. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what you did. Tell everyone about the night at the cabin. Tell them how you forced yourself on me." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My ears rang. The room spun. My fork fell out of my hand and banged against the plate. "What?" My voice cracked. "What in the world are you implying?" The air grew thick, heavy with disbelief, judgment, and shock. My wife, Emily, stared at me as though she didn't recognize the man sitting across from her. The color vanished from her face. My father-in-law rose from his chair, his fists tightening at his sides. "You disgust me," he spat. I pushed back from the table, my chair screeching across the floor. "This is insane. I've never..." "Melissa, you're lying." But her tears came then, streaming down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. The presentation was flawless. Convincing. Heartbreaking. She let out a piercing cry that cut through the air. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water, but she didn't drink. Instead, she looked at me with eyes full of betrayal. "Is it true?" Even though it was barely a whisper, her voice was louder than a scream. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. "No. God, no. Emily, you know me, you know I'd never." Her mother hit the table with her palm. "Don't you dare raise your voice to my daughter after what you've done." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped. Accusations, gasps, muttered curses. Melissa's sobs drowned out my desperate protests. Every person at that table turned cold and looked me down without hesitation, and I could feel my world crumbling around me. "I swear to you she's lying." My voice broke as I wept. "Emily, please, you have to believe me." But Emily turned away, covering her mouth with her trembling hand. A moment later, the loud slamming of a door echoed throughout the house, but I wasn't sure if it was my fault or someone else's. My heart pounded against my ribs as if trying to escape. My hands shook violently. I couldn't even run them through my hair without looking like a madman. And then silence again. This time, however, it was neither warm nor comfortable. It was oppressive. I was accused, abandoned, and completely alone as I stood in my life's wreckage. That night I didn't sleep. The walls of our bedroom felt like they were closing in, every shadow pressing down on me like an accusation. Emily lay on her side of the bed, her back to me, stiff and unmoving. The silence between us was unbearable, louder than any argument we had ever had. I wanted to reach for her, to hold her, to beg her to look into my eyes and see the truth. But I didn't. I was unable to, because I could feel it. Her faith in me had cracked. And once faith is broken, sometimes it never mends. At dawn, she slipped out of bed and left the room without a word. I heard the faint clatter of dishes downstairs, the slow creak of the back door. I followed her voice, but it wasn't meant for me. He was calling someone. "His mom. I know. I just don't know what to believe anymore." Her words sliced me open. I wanted to scream, to run into the kitchen and force her to hear me out, but I couldn't move. Lead felt like my legs. My heart sank lower than I thought possible. The calls started by midday. Her brother, her parents, even an old family friend. All of them asking questions. All of them were speaking in careful, measured tones, as though I were already guilty and they didn't want to provoke me. I tried to explain, but Melissa's tears made my explanations feel hollow. No one desired specifics. They wanted a villain, and I was it. The looks in their eyes when I saw them next. Disgust, pity, disappointment, those were harder to bear than the accusations themselves. At work, I noticed the whispers. Someone must have told someone, because suddenly conversations stopped when I walked into the room. My co-workers avoided my gaze and my boss's polite nods grew shorter, colder. And Emily, she pulled away inch by inch like the tide retreating from the shore. She stopped asking me about my day. She stopped wishing me good night with a kiss. She stopped believing in me. One night, I found her on the couch, staring at the television though it was turned off. Her eyes were bloodshot. "Do you believe her?" I asked quietly. My voice shook. Her lips parted but no words came out. She looked at me like she wanted to say no, like she wanted to believe me, but something stopped her. Fear. Doubt. And in that silence I had my answer. I slept on the couch after that. Days blurred into weeks. I became a ghost in my own home, eating in silence, moving through rooms with the weight of suspicion pressing down on me. My hands trembled constantly, my chest tight with anxiety. Every time the phone rang, my heart skipped a beat, terrified it was another relative, another confrontation, another nail in the coffin of my reputation. But the worst part wasn't anger or rejection. It was a doubt. Because when everyone around you insists you're a monster, when every eye looks at you like you're guilty, you start to wonder, what if the truth doesn't matter? What if lies are stronger than facts? What if this is who I'll always be now, defined by someone else's story? The most terrifying thought then crept into my mind. What if Emily leaves? The breaking point came one sleepless night when I found myself staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My face looked hollow, older, like I'd aged a decade in weeks. My eyes were bloodshot, my lips dry, but what haunted me most was the expression, defeat. No, I whispered to myself. Not like this. I couldn't sit quietly while Melissa destroyed everything I had built. My marriage, my reputation, my sanity. If everyone else believed her, then I had only one choice. I had to find the truth myself. The first step was to retrace the night Melissa claimed everything happened. She was vague in her accusation, deliberately so, but she had slipped up during the family dinner. She said I had been at her apartment last month. I had not even seen her in weeks prior to this explosion, so I knew that wasn't true. So I started digging. I pulled up my phone records. That night, I was at a late meeting with colleagues, followed by a bar stop for drinks, something I hadn't even mentioned to Emily because it felt insignificant. I checked my credit card statements. Receipts matched the timeline. The digital breadcrumbs were there, proof that Melissa's story couldn't possibly be true. But facts were fragile against emotions. I needed more. I drove by Melissa's place one evening, parking across the street. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought my knuckles would break. I told myself it was wrong, that I wasn't a stalker, but desperation made me linger. And then I saw it. Through her window she wasn't alone. A man was with her. They were laughing, drinking wine. He kissed her. I snapped photos with shaking hands, the flash off, my heart hammering. It didn't prove she lied about me, not directly, but it was something. If she was involved with someone, maybe this was the real father she was hiding. The next day I went further. I reached out to an old friend of mine, Mark, a private investigator. We hadn't spoken in years, but he owed me a favor. I told him everything. At first he hesitated, but then he sighed and said, "If she's hiding something, I'll find it." I nearly went insane waiting. Every time Emily looked at me with quiet suspicion, every time her phone buzzed and I saw Melissa's name on the screen, I wanted to scream. But I held on, clinging to the fragile hope that Mark would come through. 3 days later he called me. His voice was heavy and he said, "You were right. Melissa's been lying. She has been seeing a man for a while. Daniel is his moniker. And get this, she visited a clinic 2 weeks before she accused you. Pregnancy test. Lab results confirm he's the father." My knees gave way. Relief and rage collided inside me. On one hand I had the truth. On the other, I had been dragged through hell for weeks while the proof had been sitting there all along. I thanked Mark, my voice shaking. Finally, I had a weapon. Finally, I could fight back. But one thought echoed louder than the rest. Would Emily even listen? The air itself felt heavy the night I made the decision to confront Melissa. I sat in my car outside her apartment, Mark's folder of evidence in my lap. Photos, clinic records, and phone logs. My pulse thundered in my ears. This wasn't just about me anymore. My goal was to get my life back. I texted Emily, "Come with me. You need to hear this too." Her reply came slow. "Where?" "Melissa's home. Tonight. No more secrets." I had a feeling she would decline. Her car, on the other hand, came up behind mine 15 minutes later. She stepped out, arms folded, her expression cold but curious. "Why are we here?" she asked. I said, clenching the folder more tightly than I realized, "Because the truth lives here." We climbed the stairs together and I knocked. Melissa opened the door in silk pajamas, feigning surprise. Her eyes flicked from me to Emily, and for the briefest moment, fear flashed across her face. Then she recovered, twisting her lips into a smirk. "Oh, so the villain brought his audience," she purred. "Enough," I snapped. My voice shook, not with weakness but with fury I had bottled for weeks. "I've been dragged through the mud by you. My wife has been poisoned by you in my face. And for what? To cover your lies." Melissa scoffed, leaning against the doorframe. "You think showing up here will change anything? They already know what you are." I dropped the folder on her coffee table at that point. Photos of her and Daniel, copies of the clinic records, timestamps, and dates fell like daggers from the pile of papers. Emily froze. Melissa's smile faltered. "Go ahead," I said, my voice low, trembling with controlled rage. "Tell her that I am lying. Explain to her that they are not your test results. Tell her that man isn't the father." The room went silent except for the rapid beat of my own heart. Melissa's face was drained of color. Her mouth opened but no words came out. For the first time she had no script, no lie ready to spin. Emily's breathing became faster as her eyes darted around the evidence. Her lips trembled as she looked between her sister and me. "Melissa, is this accurate?" Melissa stammered. I was scared. Daniel doesn't want kids. I didn't know what else to do. You have always been the ideal person and I..." "Stop," Emily said, her voice cracking like glass. The weight of betrayal hit her full force. Her sister had tried to destroy our marriage and she had almost let it happen. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't for Melissa. "They believed you," I said, my voice breaking. "My wife. Her parents. Everyone. You stood there and watched me drown while you stood on dry land. Do you have any idea how that feels?" Melissa's silence was answered enough. Emily turned to me then, her face pale with shame. She reached for my hand, her touch tentative, like she was afraid I'd pull away. I should have trusted you," she whispered. The dam of pain inside me cracked. For weeks, I'd carried the weight of suspicion, the crushing loneliness of being abandoned by the person I loved most. Now vindication stood before me, but it was hollow, scarred by the damage already done. "I told you the truth," I said, tears burning my eyes. "From the beginning." Melissa collapsed onto the couch, head in her hands. But I didn't care anymore. I had my name back. Justice wasn't clean. It never is. But it was mine. Tense phone calls and quiet conversations filled the days that followed. Word spread quickly, as it always does in families. Melissa's secret was no longer hers alone. Emily's parents called in disbelief, their voices trembling on the line. Her father, stern and proud, demanded, "Is this true, Melissa? Did you lie about your own brother-in-law?" Melissa didn't answer. She was unable. Silence was its own confession. Everyone was stained as the shame that should have been hers rippled outward. Over the phone, Emily's mother sobbed, accusing herself of raising daughters who could betray one another. Emily moved around the house like a ghost for days without speaking. However, our silence is now different. Remorse, not suspicion, was what it was. One night, as I stood washing dishes, Emily slipped her arms around my waist from behind. I froze, the sponge slipping from my hand. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I almost lost you. I let her get in my head. I let myself doubt you when you've never given me a reason to." I turned to face her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale. For weeks I had begged for this moment, for her to believe me. And now that it was here, my heart ached with both relief and weariness. I mumbled, "You didn't just doubt me. You left me when I needed you the most." Her tears spilled over. "I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making it right, if you'll let me." I wanted to immediately forgive her and forget about the hurt with a single word. But forgiveness isn't magic. It's work. So I held her, my own tears falling, and whispered, "Then we start from here." Melissa, on the other hand, faced the storm she had created. When she learned the truth, Daniel vanished, leaving her with nothing but broken pride. Friends stopped returning calls from her. Family gatherings grew colder. The woman who had once thrived on attention now found herself shunned, her lies heavy chains she could not escape. Me. I rebuilt, slowly, painfully, but stronger. The lesson carved into me was brutal yet clear. Truth will always outlive lies, but the cost of betrayal is permanent scars. I thought about those weeks of isolation, the trembling hands, the sleepless nights. Lies had almost destroyed me, but they hadn't. I had resisted, brought the truth to light, and taken back my name. At our next family dinner, the room was different. People spoke carefully around me, shame lingering in their eyes. No one apologized outright, but I didn't need them to. My vindication was written in their silence. And as I sat beside Emily, her hand clasped firmly in mine, I realized something powerful. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it whispers, quiet but undeniable, echoing forever in the hearts of those who once doubted you. Months passed. Seasons changed. The wound Melissa left behind didn't vanish, but it healed into something else. A scar, a reminder. Emily and I rebuilt brick by fragile brick. Some days were harder than others. But every time I looked into her eyes, I saw the weight of regret, the determination to never let doubt win again. And slowly I let myself believe in us again. Melissa faded into the background. Family gatherings went on without her laughter, without her scheming presence. She had become the ghost of her own making, whispered about, pitied, forgotten. One evening, as Emily and I sat on the porch watching the sun sink into the horizon, she reached for my hand. "Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" she asked softly. I thought about it. The agony, the betrayal, and the dark nights. And then I thought about the truth, sharp and undeniable, standing taller than every lie. "No," I said at last. "Because now we know. We know who we can trust. And we know that no matter how deep a lie cuts, the truth will always bleed through." The sky turned crimson, the day surrendering to night. And in that quiet, I understood justice had been served. Not with thunder, not with applause, but with the steady certainty that truth had survived the storm. And that was enough. In the end, the truth came out, but the scars of betrayal will never fully fade. Trust, once broken, is the hardest thing to repair. Justice may have been served, but the lesson is clear. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most. If you love this type of story on this channel, join us in the next Famigraphic Show, Strari. How will you feel if your spouse or family instantly believed a lie about you without giving you a chance to defend yourself? Would you ever forgive them? Or is that trust gone forever? Express yourself.